My daughter spiked my coffee with sleeping pills for 3 weeks. My own brother forged my signature to sell the pharmacy the first built with 40 years of sweat equity. And my son-in-law already had a buyer for my house before I had even lost my mind. What none of them imagined is that the old lady they wanted to turn into a ghost had installed hidden cameras in every single room. And that the buyer for the pharmacy was, in reality, my liar in disguise. But before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and drop a comment below. Where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Rose Martin. I am 64 years old, and I spent 40 of them behind the counter of a drugstore, selling medicine to cure people. I know every pill by name, by smell, by shape. I know the difference between an anti-anxiety med and a sedative just by looking at the color. I know when someone is on the wrong medication just by the way they walk. The irony of my story is that this exact knowledge is what saved my life. Because when my own daughter started drugging me, I realized it by the third day. But let me back up a little. Let me tell you how the woman I breastfed became my worst enemy. It all started 2 months after I buried my husband, Gerald. 41 years of marriage. He died of a massive heart attack on a Tuesday morning, right as we were opening the pharmacy. He collapsed behind the counter, right between the antibiotics and the cough syrups. There wasn't time to do anything. When the paramedics arrived, he was already gone. Gerald was a man of few words and hard work. We started from zero. I was a nursing assistant making minimum wage. He was a city bus driver. We saved every penny. We bought a commercial space when this town was still just a dusty spot on the map in the Midwest. We opened Martin's Pharmacy with 3 shelves and a dream. Today, 40 years later, we are the biggest independent pharmacy in the county. 3 employees, a contract with the city, fully stocked inventory. The shop turned into a 2-story building. And the money we saved over decades turned into a nest egg that nobody knew about. Nobody. Not even my daughter. Gerald always used to say that quiet money lasts longer. We lived simply. Modest car, clothes from department stores, nothing flashy. People saw us as a couple of old workers, honest strugglers. They thought we had a comfortable life, nothing more. They didn't know about the 2 rental condos downtown. They didn't know about the investment accounts that had been compounding interest for 30 years. They didn't know that, on paper, I was worth nearly $2 million. Until the reading of the will. When the attorney read the numbers out loud, I saw my daughter Valerie's face change. It wasn't surprise. It was something else. A strange glint in her eyes, a way of moistening her lips, a breath that quickened slightly. I know that look. I've seen it in addicted patients walking into the pharmacy begging for controlled prescriptions. It's the look of hunger, of obsession, of greed devouring the soul. My daughter was starving, and I was the meal. Valerie is 39. She's my only child. I raised her with all the love a mother can give. I paid for private school, a business degree, English tutors, study abroad programs. She married at 25 to a man named Jason, my son-in-law. He worked at a bank, wore expensive suits, spoke smoothly. They seemed like the perfect couple. Mortgaged condo, brand new car every year, smiling photos on social media. What I didn't know was that their castle was built on sand. Jason had been fired from the bank almost 3 years prior, fraud, embezzling client funds. The only reason he hadn't stepped foot in prison was because the bank preferred to hush up the case to avoid a scandal. Since then, he lived off small-time scams, selling cars that weren't his, putting other people's money into pyramid schemes, taking out loans in other people's names. Valerie knew everything. Not only did she know, she helped. Both of them were drowning in debt up to their necks. And then they discovered that the simple old mother was worth a fortune. A week after the inventory, Valerie showed up at my door. She said she was worried about me. A 64-year-old widow, living alone in that big house, running a pharmacy. It was dangerous, she said. It was too much weight for one person. She wanted to help me. I, like an idiot, believed her. I let Valerie and Jason move into my house. She said it would be temporary, just until I recovered from the grief. They would stay in the guest room. They would help me with the pharmacy. Everything seemed to make sense. After all, she was my daughter. My only child. Blood of my blood. The first few days were actually nice. Having movement in the house, voices, company. Valerie cooked for me. Jason fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. They seemed genuinely concerned. I let my guard down. I thought maybe I had misjudged that glint in my daughter's eyes the day of the will reading. Maybe it was just surprise, not greed. I thought wrong. In the second week, my brother showed up. Roger, older than me, 68, a man who spent his entire life envying what Gerald and I built. He never held down a steady job. He lived off odd jobs, favors, and borrowing money he never paid back. When we were young, He stole the money our parents had left for both of us. He blew it all on gambling and booze. I never forgave him, but I didn't fight him either. I kept a polite distance like you do with an uncomfortable relative. Roger came with his wife, Linda, a creature with beady eyes and a sugary voice who always treated me with fake affection. The two of them said they had come to help. That's what family is for. That I couldn't be left alone in such a difficult time. Suddenly, my house was full. My daughter, my son-in-law, my brother, my sister-in-law. For people who claimed to love me, but who looked at my belongings as if they were already theirs. It was in the third week that I noticed the coffee. I have always drunk black coffee, no sugar. Gerald used to joke that my blood type was caffeine. 40 years working in a pharmacy, waking up at 5 in the morning, serving customers until 10 at night. Coffee was my fuel. 2 cups in the morning, 1 after lunch, another in the late afternoon. Always the same. Always bitter. Always strong. That's why it was strange when I started feeling sleepy. At first, I thought it was the grief. Sadness weighs on the body, makes us slow, tired. Losing a husband after 40 years is no small thing. But the sleepiness I felt wasn't normal. It was a strange lethargy, a fog that descended on my head every time I drank coffee in the morning. I would get woozy, confused, having trouble thinking. I spent the entire afternoon in a semi-conscious state, as if I were floating inside a bad dream. On the third day, I decided not to drink the coffee Valerie prepared. I said I wasn't hungry. That I would eat later. I pretended to take a sip and poured the rest down the sink when no one was looking. And I waited. The difference was brutal. Suddenly, my mind came back. The fog vanished. I was alert, awake, I was myself again. And with that clarity came the horror of realization. My daughter was drugging me. I went to the pharmacy that afternoon. I invented an excuse, said I needed to check the inventory. I went into the back office and opened the cabinet where we kept the controlled substances. 2 boxes of clonazepam were missing. Strong sedative. Controlled. The kind you need a special prescription to buy. And I hadn't sold those to anyone. I sat in the office chair and stared at the open cabinet for a time I can't calculate. It could have been a minute. It could have been an hour. My brain tried to process the information, but something inside me refused to accept it. My daughter. The little girl I rocked in my arms. The girl who ran to me crying when she fell off her bike. The teenager who hugged me when she got her acceptance letter to college. That person was poisoning me. Why? The answer came that same night, when everyone thought I was sleeping. I had learned to fake it. I would take the coffee in front of them, let the liquid touch my lips, but wouldn't swallow. Then I'd spit it out discreetly into a tissue. At night, I went to bed early and closed my eyes. They thought I was knocked out by the sedative. They didn't know I was wide awake, listening to every word they said in the living room. That's how I discovered the plan. Jason spoke quietly, but the house was old and the walls were thin. I could hear everything from my room if I pressed my ear to the door. He was explaining to Roger how it would work. His tone was cold, calculating, professional, as if he were presenting a business plan. First, he said they needed me to appear incapacitated, confused, senile, unable to care for myself. The doses of sedatives in the coffee were for that. Over time, I would become more and more apathetic, more lost. The neighbors would notice. The pharmacy employees would notice. When it was time to act, everyone would confirm that Mrs. Rose wasn't right in the head. Second, they needed a medical report. Jason knew a psychiatrist in the city, a guy who sold diagnoses for cash. All it would take was one consultation with him, and I would leave there officially declared incompetent. Senile dementia, early onset Alzheimer's, anything that would justify a conservatorship case. Third, with the conservatorship, Valerie would take over as my legal guardian. She would have power of attorney to manage all my assets. The pharmacy would be sold. The condos would be sold. The house would be sold. And I would be placed in some cheap nursing home while they split my money. Roger asked what his cut would be. Jason replied that it depended on his collaboration. If Roger helped convince the neighbors that I was crazy, he'd get 20%. If he brought more family members to confirm the story, he'd get 30%. It was a business, Jason said. Everyone got paid according to their contribution. My brother accepted without hesitation. I stood so still behind that door that I think I even stopped breathing. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid they'd hear it. My hands were shaking. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. Right there, in that dark hallway, while my family planned to destroy me, something inside me died. The mother died. The sister died. The naive old woman who believed in blood ties died. And in her place, something else was born. Something cold, calculating, patient. Something that knew the only way to survive was to appear weaker than I was. They wanted a senile old woman. They would get a senile old woman. But this old woman was taking notes. The next morning, I pretended to wake up dizzy. I complained of a headache. I asked what day it was as if I couldn't remember. I called Valerie by the wrong name twice. I left the bathroom faucet running. I tripped over a chair. Every gesture was calculated. Every confusion was rehearsed. I was giving them exactly what they wanted to see. And while they exchanged looks of satisfaction, thinking the plan was working, I was watching. I was learning. I was planning. I discovered that the appointment with the crooked psychiatrist was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I discovered that Jason already had an interested buyer for the pharmacy. I discovered that Roger was spreading gossip with the neighbors, that I was very confused. Poor thing, that Gerald's death had broken my mind. I had 2 weeks to build my defense. And that is exactly what I did. In the first week, I installed the cameras. One of the pharmacy employees, Matthew Matt, has worked with me for 15 years. He's a trustworthy guy, honest, started as a delivery driver and now manages a register. He was the only one who noticed something was wrong. One day he pulled me into a corner and told me, whispering, that he found the way my daughter and son-in-law looked at the inventory strange, that they were asking questions about the revenue, that Jason had asked to see the accounting books. I told Matt everything. I told him about the sedative, about the conversation I overheard, about the conservatorship plan. He went pale. He wanted to call the police right then. I told him no. I said I needed proof, that the word of a confused old woman was worth nothing against for people saying she was crazy. Matt helped me buy the cameras. Small ones, the kind that look like a phone charger or a smoke detector. We installed one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway near my bedroom. I learned to use the phone app that showed the live feed. Every night after they thought I was drugged, I watched the recordings. And what I saw was even worse than I imagined. Valerie and Jason rummaged through my documents when I was sleeping. They found the deed to the pharmacy, the rental contracts for the condos, the bank statements. They took pictures of everything. They ran numbers on a spreadsheet. They divvied up the assets between them as if I were already dead. Roger was worse. My brother, my own brother, would go into my room in the middle of the night. He dug through my drawers looking for jewelry, looking for hidden cash. One night, he took the engagement ring Gerald gave me 40 years ago. He put it in his pocket as if it were his. I had to bite my pillow not to scream. Linda, my sister-in-law, was responsible for spreading the lie around town. She went to the grocery store and commented, loudly, that her sister-in-law wasn't doing well. She stood at the bakery inside, saying it was so sad to see a person lose their mind like that. She was building my reputation as a lunatic brick by brick, with the skill of someone who's been doing this for a long time. I recorded everything. Every conversation, every confession, every moment they showed who they really were. I saved the videos in 3 different places, on my phone, on a flash drive hidden at the pharmacy, and in the cloud on an account only Matt knew existed. In the second week, I went to see a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I drove to Chicago, alone, on a day I said I was going to the doctor for routine checkups. I sought out attorney Anthony Tony Mendez, a specialist in family law and crimes against the elderly. He received me with skepticism at first. Another paranoid old lady, he must have thought. Another mother-in-law who doesn't like the son-in-law. Then I showed him the videos. His expression changed in the first minute. By the second, he was already taking notes. By the third, he asked his secretary to cancel his appointments for the rest of the day. We spent 3 hours in that office. I told him everything. From the glint in Valeri's eyes the day of the will to the ring Roger stole from my bedroom. Attorney Mendez was direct. What they were doing had a name: fraud, elder abuse, grand larceny, forgery, and possibly attempted murder. Since they were drugging me without consent with a controlled substance, if I wanted, he could request the arrest of everyone right then and there. I said I didn't want that. Not yet. I wanted them to go all the way. I wanted them to try to sell the pharmacy. I wanted them to forge my signature to complete the crime. I wanted them to dig their own grave so deep they couldn't climb out. Attorney Mendez looked at me for a long moment. I think he saw something in my eyes, something that made him understand I wasn't a victim asking for help. I was a strategist setting a trap. He smiled. He said I was the most interesting client he had ever had, and he agreed to be part of the plan. The plan was simple, but required patience. First, Attorney Mendez would create a shell company, an investment firm that supposedly wanted to buy pharmacies in the Midwest. He would introduce himself to Jason as a representative of that company. He would offer a generous price for Martin's pharmacy. He would let them believe they had found the perfect buyer. Second, I would fake even more confusion. I would let them take me to the crooked psychiatrist. I would let them get the fake medical report. I would let them think they had one. Third, when they tried to finalize a sale, when they put the signature on the paper, when they believed the scam was complete, we would snap the trap shut. Attorney Mendez had already spoken with a trusted district attorney. He had already prepared a detailed criminal complaint. He had already gathered forensic experts to analyze the videos and confirm they weren't doctored. Everything was ready. Only the grand finale was missing. I went back home that night and pretended to be more confused than ever. I called Valerie Gerald. I asked where my mother was, who died 20 years ago. I cried for no apparent reason. My daughter hugged me and said everything was going to be okay, that she would take care of me, that I didn't need to worry about anything, and I let her think I believed her. The appointment with the psychiatrist was on a Wednesday. Jason drove. Valerie sat in the back seat with me, holding my hand as if I were a child. The clinic was in a fancy neighborhood in the city, in a discreet building with a bronze plaque on the door. Everything very professional, very respectable. The kind of place you wouldn't question. The doctor's name was Foster. A man in his 50s, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses. He received me with a rehearsed smile and had me sit in a leather armchair. He asked simple questions at first. My name, my age, what day it was. I failed them all. I said my name was Mary. I said I was 72. I said today was Sunday and I was waiting for Gerald to go to church. Doctor Foster wrote everything down in a notebook, nodding his head, feigning concern. He didn't really examine me. He didn't order blood work, didn't do an MRI, didn't check if I was on any medication that could cause confusion. He already knew what the diagnosis would be before I walked in. The report was probably already written, it just lacked the date. At the end of the consultation, he called Valerie into the room. He spoke in a grave tone about early onset dementia, about cognitive decline, about the need for constant supervision. He said that, in his opinion, I was no longer in any condition to manage my own assets. He strongly recommended a conservatorship proceeding. Valerie cried, perfect tears running down her face, lip trembling, voice cracking with emotion. She thanked the doctor for being so honest, said she would do whatever was necessary to protect her mother, that it was very hard, but she was prepared to assume that responsibility. I witnessed that performance sitting in the armchair, hands in my lap, pretending not to understand what was happening. Inside, I was recording every second in my memory, every lying word, every fake tear. The report was ready in 2 days. Attorney Mendez got a copy through his contacts. The document was a work of fiction. It described symptoms I didn't have, behaviors I didn't demonstrate, a mental decline that simply didn't exist. It was my civil death sentence, signed by a doctor I had seen for less than 30 minutes. With the report in hand, Jason accelerated the plans. He got in touch with Attorney Mendez's shell company. He scheduled a meeting to discuss the sale of the pharmacy. He was excited, I could see it by the way he walked around the house. By the way he looked at the walls as if he were already calculating how much he would get for them. The meeting happened in the living room of my own house. Jason insisted I be present, but in a corner, quiet, apparently oblivious to everything. Valerie served coffee and cookies as if she were the owner of the house. Roger and Linda came to give support, to be witnesses to the victory. The company representative was, in reality, a private investigator hired by Attorney Mendez. A discreet man, gray suit, who perfectly played the role of an interested investor. He asked questions about the pharmacy, about the revenue, about the real estate. He asked to see the documentation. Jason presented everything with pride. The pharmacy deeds, the rental contracts, the medical report proving my incapacity. He explained that, since my daughter would shortly be my legal guardian, the sale could be done without problems. Everything within the law, he guaranteed. The detective pretended to analyze the documents. He asked a few questions about the conservatorship, about when it would be finalized, about the legal details. Jason answered everything with confidence. The petition would be filed with the court the following week. In a matter of days, Valerie would have total power over my assets. The sale could be concluded before the end of the month. Meanwhile, I stayed in my corner, staring at nothing, pretending not to understand any of what was happening. Occasionally I mumbled something nonsensical, or asked where Gerald was. Valerie would throw me looks of fake concern. Roger could barely hide his smile. At the end of the meeting, the detective said the company was very interested in the pharmacy, that they would make a formal offer shortly, that he was anxious to close the deal. Jason walked him to the door, shaking his hand enthusiastically. When the car drove away, he came back to the living room and hugged Valerie. The two of them laughed, relieved, victorious. Linda clapped. Roger opened a bottle of wine he had grabbed from my pantry. They toasted in front of me. They raised their glasses and celebrated the heist as if I weren't there, as if I were already an old piece of furniture, a disposable item, an obstacle that would soon be removed. I got up from the chair and said I was going to sleep. No one said goodnight. The conservatorship lawsuit was filed on a Monday. Valerie came back from the courthouse with the paper in her hand, showing it off like a trophy. She explained to me with that sweet, fake voice I already knew so well, that it was for my own good, that the judge was going to decide that I needed help, that she would take care of everything for me, that I didn't need to worry about anything anymore. I nodded, eyes empty, pretending not to understand. What Valerie didn't know is that Attorney Mendez already had copies of all the documentation. That drive, Foster's report was already being analyzed by a real forensic expert. That the camera recordings had already been handed over to the district attorney's office. That the trap was ready to snap shut. The conservatorship hearing was set for the following week. It would be quick, Jason said. With the medical report and the family's testimony, the judge would have no choice but to declare me incompetent. It was just a formality, he guaranteed. While we waited, life in the house continued as before. They kept putting sedatives in my coffee. I kept pretending to drink it and act groggy. Roger kept rifling through my things. Linda kept spreading lies around town. But something had changed in me. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. The anger had transformed into something colder, more patient. I looked at those people who shared my blood and felt nothing anymore. Neither love nor hate. Just an icy determination to see justice done. The night before the hearing, Valerie came to my room. She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. Her eyes were wet, but I knew they were crocodile tears. She said she loved me. That everything she was doing was out of love. That I would understand someday, when I was better. I looked at her for a long moment. That face I had known since her first second of life. Those eyes I had seen open to the world. That voice I had taught to speak. And I wondered at what moment my little girl had died. At what moment this monster had taken her place. I said nothing. I just closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. On the morning of the hearing, I woke up early. I showered, put on simple clothes, combed my hair. When Valerie came to get me, I was sitting on the bed, waiting, with that vacant look she expected to see. The courthouse was downtown. An old building with stone pillars and marble steps. Jason parked out front and helped me out of the car. Valerie held me by the arm as if I were going to break at any moment. The courtroom was small, with a large bench where the judge would sit, and wooden chairs for the parties. Besides us, Roger and Linda were present, having come as witnesses. They would say that I was confused, that I couldn't take care of myself, that Valerie was the most suitable person to be my guardian. Everything according to the script. The judge entered and everyone stood up. He was a man of about 60, with white hair and a severe expression. He looked at the papers in front of him, flipped through the medical report, examined the complaint. Then he looked up and looked directly at me. I held his gaze. For the first time in weeks, I didn't fake confusion. I looked at him with all the clarity I had, with all the lucidity they thought I no longer possessed. The judge furrowed his brow. Before he could say anything, the courtroom doors opened. Attorney Mendez entered first with his leather briefcase and impeccable suit. Behind him, the assistant district attorney he had contacted. And behind the prosecutor, 2 uniformed police officers. Valerie stood up, confused. Jason went pale. Roger looked around like a cornered animal. Attorney Mendez approached the judge and handed over a stack of documents. He explained in a calm and professional voice that he had evidence of a criminal conspiracy against his client, Rose Martin. That the family members present in that room had planned to drug her, fraudulently declare her incompetent, and seize possession of all her assets. That the medical report was fake, issued by a corrupt professional. That everything was recorded on video. The judge looked at the documents. He looked at the recordings. He looked at me. And then he looked at my daughter. Valerie was standing, trembling, eyes wide with panic. Jason had already stood up, ready to run, but the officers blocked the door. Roger tried to stammer some explanation, but the words wouldn't come out. The judge banged the gavel. He said the petition for conservatorship was denied, and that the persons present therein needed to accompany the officers to give a statement. I stood up from the chair. For the first time in weeks, I walked upright with firm steps. I looked at Valerie, who was now crying for real, tears of fear and desperation streaming down her face. She reached her hand out to me and said a single word, "Mom." I walked past her without stopping. The district attorney's office was 3 blocks from the courthouse. I went in Attorney Mendez's car, watching out the window as a squad car passed in front of us, carrying my daughter, my son-in-law, my brother, and my sister-in-law. For people I loved, whom I trusted, whom I welcomed into my home. Now they were for suspects of crimes that could cost them years in prison. On the way, Attorney Mendez explained what would happen next. The prosecutor would take everyone's statements. The evidence would be officially analyzed. Dr. Foster, the corrupt psychiatrist, would also be investigated and would likely lose his medical license. The criminal trial would open in the coming weeks. And the pharmacy? I asked. He smiled. The pharmacy was mine. It always was, always would be. No sales document had been signed. No transfer had been made. All they had was a failed plan and a pile of evidence against themselves. We arrived at the precinct when the sun was already high. I sat in a waiting room while, from the other side of the hallway, I heard raised voices. Valerie screaming that she was innocent. Jason demanding a lawyer. Roger swearing he knew nothing. The prosecutor came to speak with me after a few hours. He was a young man, serious, who treated me with respect. He said the recordings were very clear. That Jason's confession planning the heist left no room for doubt. That they would be charged with fraud, forgery, administration of noxious substances, and attempted fraudulent guardianship. I asked how much time they would get. The prosecutor paused. He said it depended on the judge, the defense, many factors. But considering the severity of the crimes and the fact that the victim was a senior citizen, it could be 5 to 15 years, especially for Jason, who seemed to be the architect of it all. I nodded in silence. He asked me if I wanted to see my daughter, said she was asking to speak with me, that she wouldn't stop crying. I said no. I went back home that afternoon. The house was empty now, silent in a way it hadn't been in weeks. I walked through the rooms, looking at the things they had moved, the drawers they had rifled through, the spaces they had invaded. I found my engagement ring in the pocket of a pair of Roger's pants. He had forgotten to take it when he was arrested. I put the ring on my finger and stared at it for a long time. Gerald had given me that ring on a June night, 42 years ago. He had promised to love and protect me forever. He kept his promise. I was keeping mine. In the days that followed, the whole town knew what had happened. The news traveled from mouth to mouth, corner to corner. The story of old Rose, who pretended to be crazy to catch the family that wanted to rob her. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. The majority, with a mixture of shock and fascination. The pharmacy employees came to see me. Matt cried when he hugged me. He said he had prayed every night for it to work out, that he had never seen such bravery in anyone. I told him it wasn't bravery. It was survival. Attorney Mendes took care of all the legal details. He got a restraining order against everyone involved. None of them could come near me, the pharmacy, or my house. He also started a civil lawsuit to recover the money Jason had siphoned from my accounts. In the last few months, it wasn't much, but it was a start. The trial happened 6 months later. I was called to testify. It was the first time I saw Valerie since that day at the police station. She looked different. Thinner, paler, with deep bags under her eyes and unkempt hair. Pre-trial detention hadn't been kind to her. When our eyes met, she started to cry. She screamed my name, said she loved me, said she had been influenced by Jason, that she never wanted to hurt me. I didn't answer. I sat on the witness stand and told my story. I told about the spiked coffee, about the conversations I overheard, about the recordings I made. I told about the fear I felt, about the loneliness, about the pain of discovering that my own daughter wanted to destroy me. The judge listened to everything in silence. When I finished, she looked at me with something that looked like respect. Jason got 12 years. Valerie got 8. Roger got 6. Linda got 4 with the possibility of parole. Dr. Foster lost his medical license and was sentenced to 2 years for document falsification. When the sentence was read, Valerie fainted. Jason started screaming that he was going to appeal. Roger lowered his head and cried quietly. I left the courtroom and went straight to the pharmacy. I had work to do. The following months were strange. I was free. I was safe. I had won. But the victory had a bitter taste, like reheated coffee left too long on the burner. I would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling, thinking about Valerie in prison, thinking about how we had reached this point. The town treated me like a heroine, but I didn't feel like one. I felt like someone who had survived a fire. Alive, yes, but full of burns that might never heal. Matt practically took over the pharmacy with me. I promoted him to manager, gave him a raise, shared part of the profits. He deserved it. Without him, I wouldn't have made it. The neighbors who previously believed Linda's lies now came to apologize. They said they didn't know, that they were deceived, that they felt terrible for doubting me. I accepted the apologies with a polite smile, but inside I knew I would never forget who had abandoned me when I needed them most. One day, I received a letter from prison. It was from Valerie. 300 pages with shaky handwriting and tear stains. It said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. That she knew she had committed unforgivable mistakes. That Jason had manipulated her, but that wasn't an excuse. That she thought of me every day. That she loved me despite everything. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and never replied. What could I say? That I forgave her? That would be a lie. That I hated her? That wasn't true either. What I felt for Valerie was something more complicated than love or hate. It was a wound that didn't bleed anymore, but wouldn't close either. An absence that ached in the soul. Attorney Mendez helped me reorganize my assets. I sold one of the condos and put the money in a safe investment. I remodeled the pharmacy, bought new equipment, hired another employee. Business was good, better than ever. But the house seemed too big for one person. That was when I learned about the project. A social worker from the city was organizing a foster care program for vulnerable seniors, people who had no family, or who had been abandoned, or who suffered abuse like I almost suffered. She needed volunteers, space, resources. I offered everything I could. I transformed the empty rooms in my house into bedrooms for the program. 2 ladies came to live with me in the first few months. Mrs. Mary, 78, whose children had disappeared with her entire pension, and Mrs. Lucy, 71, whose addicted grandson beat her until she was rescued by the police. They arrived scared, broken, hopeless. I knew that look. I had seen it in the mirror. Little by little, we rebuilt ourselves together. We drank coffee in the morning on the porch, the same coffee I now prepared with my own hands. We chatted about life, about the past, about the future. We laughed at silly things. We cried over sad things. We were 3 old women the world had tried to destroy, but who refused to die. The program grew. The city started to support it. Other houses volunteered. A year later, we had a support network helping dozens of elderly people in the region. And I discovered something I didn't expect, a new purpose. The pain of losing my daughter never went away completely, but it mixed with other things. With the gratitude of the people I helped, with the pride of seeing Mrs. Mary smiling again, with the peace of knowing my story had served a purpose. Gerald always said the meaning of life is to leave the world a little better than we found it. I had spent 40 years selling medicine to cure bodies. Now I was trying to cure souls. A year and a half after the sentencing, I got a call. It was from the Women's Correctional Facility. Valerie was sick. She had developed a liver problem, something serious that needed specialized treatment. Her lawyer was asking for a transfer to a hospital, and she wanted to see me. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time. I didn't go see Valerie that day, nor the next, nor the week after. But I thought about her. I thought a lot. I thought about the 5-year-old girl running through the pharmacy, playing hide-and-seek between the shelves. I thought about the teenager helping me count pills on Saturday afternoons. I thought about the adult woman I thought I knew, but who was a stranger. I thought about myself, too. About the old woman I had become. About the woman who had survived the worst betrayal possible and found the strength to start over. That woman deserved peace. She deserved to move on. She deserved to forget. But she also deserved closure. I went to the hospital on a Sunday morning. Valerie was in a private room, handcuffed to the bed, with an officer guarding the door. She was even thinner than at the trial, skin jaundiced from the liver disease, eyes sunken and tired. When she saw me enter, she tried to sit up, but the handcuff pulled her back. Tears started streaming down her face instantly. I sat in the chair next to the bed. I said nothing for a long time. I just looked at her, at that woman who had come out of me 39 years ago, who had been my greatest joy and my greatest pain. She asked for forgiveness, said she knew she didn't deserve it, that she didn't expect me to forgive her, but that she needed to say it, needed me to know, that she had made a terrible mistake and regretted it every day of her life. I listened in silence. When she finished, I leaned forward and took her hand. It was a thin, weak, cold hand. It didn't feel like my daughter's hand. It felt like the hand of a stranger. I told her I didn't know if I could forgive, that maybe I never would, that what she had done had broken something inside me that couldn't be repaired. But I also said that I didn't want to live with hate. That hate was the poison that killed the one carrying it, not the one who deserved it. That I was going to try, day by day, to let go of that weight. Not for her, for me. Valerie cried harder. She squeezed my hand with what strength she had. She said she loved me. That she had always loved me, even when she did horrible things. That I was the best mother anyone could have, and that she was the worst daughter. I stood up. I looked at her one last time, and I walked out of the room without looking back. I don't know if I'll go back. I don't know if I want to go back, but I know I needed to go that time. I needed to see with my own eyes what was left of my daughter. I needed to close that door, even if I didn't lock it completely. Today, 2 years after everything, my life is different. The pharmacy continues to operate, now with Matt as a partner. The house continues to be full, now with for seniors fostered by the program. I continue waking up early, working, living. Sometimes at night, when everyone has gone to sleep, I go out to the porch and sit in the chair where Gerald used to sit. I look at the stars and talk to him in my thoughts. I tell him how my day was, how the pharmacy is doing, how things are, and I give thanks. I give thanks that he taught me to be strong. I give thanks that he loved me for so many years. I give thanks that he left me the knowledge that saved me, because that's what saved me in the end. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was knowledge. Knowing how to recognize what they were putting in my coffee. Knowing that something was wrong. Knowing that I needed to act. If I could leave a message for anyone watching this story, it is this: never underestimate a person because of their age. Never believe that an elderly person is weak, is foolish, is easy to fool. We spent decades surviving in this world. We learn things you can't even dream of. And if someone tries to knock us down, we know how to get back up. My name is Rose Martin. I am 66 years old now, and I am more alive than ever. Now if you like the story, click subscribe, and tell me in the comments, which part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't upload here. See you there.